Well, today I'm interviewing John Hartig. This is Tanya Kabbalah, and this project is for the White Lake Environmental. This interview is for the White Lake Environmental History Project. And John, I did want to ask you: did you sign the legal release form?
Yes, I sent those over to you earlier this morning.
Okay, thank you very much. And I'd like to start out by asking you a little bit about your background and how does that have a connection to White Lake?
Yeah, well, first of all, it's a pleasure to be with you today, Tanya, to talk about this, and thanks for doing this wonderful project. I was back in the 70s. I was an employee of Michigan Department of Natural Resources working on the Great Lakes Nearshore Surveillance Program, and we were looking at some, pollution problems along, Lake Superior, Lake Michigan, Lake Huron, Lake Erie, and the connecting channels, and White Lake popped up because of, back then, it was primarily, Hooker got a lot of attention, Hooker Chemical Company, because of the groundwater contamination, and some studies were done, and the DNR, estimated that about 368 kilograms per day of chlorinated hydrocarbons were entering the lake and contaminating wells in the area. And so we were working on those studies, and it was an area of concern where contaminants and water pollution was impacting beneficial uses and impairing them. And so we worked through the International Joint Commission to propose a RAP process, a remedial action plan process. So, my sort of first memories of all of this is back in the Hooker Chemical days when that we had measurable loadings of contaminants like hexachloropentadiene, cyclopentadiene, that was C56 going in, and carbon tetrachloride and trichloroethylene, those kinds of compounds going into the lake. And then working through the International Joint Commission to get a comprehensive and systematic process to clean these areas up called the RAP process. We got it we got a recommendation from the Great Lakes Water Quality Board. We put that forward in 1984, and it became official. All 8 Great Lakes states, Michigan and the 7 other Great Lakes ones, and the provinces of Ontario and Quebec committed to a RAP process to clean these areas of concern up. So that's when I got to meet you.
Okay, and do you have any initial memories of White Lake or the area? I mean, just your, what you remember from, a visual perspective?
I just remember the barren, Hooker site, you know what I mean? And trying to get, back then everyone trying to intercept the contaminated groundwater, so trying to get a series of purge wells in there, and obviously going to court over that as well, to do that. So, almost like a abandoned brownfield kind of look to the area and everything, and yet there were portions of the lake that were just an incredible recreational resource and beautiful, right, as a coastal lake. And so it was almost like a paradox between the heavy chemical industry and this unbelievable recreational resource called White Lake.
Well, what kind of involvement did you have in the early stages of getting activity going on White Lake?
I got a chance to go after my days at Michigan DNR, and I went over to the International Joint Commission in 1984, and my job was to get the RAP process off the ground for the Great Lakes Water Quality Board. So I got a chance to visit, back then there was 42 areas of concern before they added Presque Isle Harbor, Erie, over in Erie, Pennsylvania, but there were 42, and so to sort of get it off the ground. So what are the problems? Do we have a good, assessment of the geographic extent of the problems? How much contamination is there? How comprehensive and systematic ecosystem approach. So that is that was a change for governments, and from a top-down command and control, telling everyone what it's going to be and how it's going to be done, to more of a bottom-up approach that would involve all user groups and accounting for the interrelationships between land, air, water, and all living things, including humans, and then involving all these stakeholders in of a plan and implementing the plan. Everyone was hopeful that it would only take, a relatively short amount of time, 10 years or 15 years. One of the rap groups said, well, we hope to get it done in 20 years. And here we now are, over 25 years later, and people say, well, why does it take so long? Well, in some of these problems, like White Lake, were not created in just a few short years, like a decade. It took over a century to create some of these problems, and so how can we expect to solve them in a short period of time? But it's been really heartening for me to see how the whole process has moved forward and laid the groundwork for what needs to be done, and then when money became available, to get some money to do the things that are now helping restore impaired beneficiary uses.
Now I know, you were very helpful when you visited the White Lake area, John. We were very lucky to have you, and I think, in some ways, I think your role for us was one of a cheerleader. You guys, good that you're getting involved and providing us with the assistance that we needed to get started on, looking at the problems and beginning to address them. Is that typical of the role that you played in the areas of concern?
Yeah, that was sort of like come in and explain the process, but then create some cooperative learning. You can remember, Tanya, how we held rep forums, and we were once a year we'd bring all the groups together and to try to share so that everyone can learn from each other's experiences too, and then get the collective weight behind, the need for cleanup, and remediation. And so, we were about cooperative learning, trying to help people move along. Certainly wanted to be a catalyst, and we wanted, to explain what, the Great Lakes Water Quality Agreement was, what the IJC's role was, and then with the 87 agreement, they gave the IJC more of a review and evaluation mode. But I think prior to 87, they had more of a catalytic role. You know what I mean? Sort of a catalytic, being a catalyst and a galvanizer of public support and a champion for using the ecosystem approach to solve these problems.
Well, it certainly was a catalyst for the White Lake area. Your help was very instrumental in inspiring us and helping us to get focused. What were your impressions of the White Lake area community? Kind of the people who live there, the government and resources. Do you recall? Were we similar to other areas of concern communities?
Well, I think some of my early memories was interaction with Hooker, and those obviously Hooker was did not acknowledge the problems at first, right? And they were in denial, and so those were some of my first memories, and then it was there were a lot of people in the town who were sort of depended on some of these industries for their jobs, and then there were a few people like yourself and others who really thought about longer term in terms of what this lake could be and what it could mean to quality of life, to future economic base of tourism and outdoor recreation and sustainable development, and my first memories were some of the real adversarial relationships with Hooker, and of course then we had to go to court. The state went to court with Hooker, but I also had memories of just how much people cared
What impact do you think the White Lake area's industrial pollution had on the community, or maybe communities just like this in general, just an overall impact?
I would say, well, these, can you imagine where we have this big chemical pollution? It's been huge. The legacy that some of these chemical industries left in terms of contaminated sediments and contaminated groundwater and groundwater, loadings to surface waters, is a huge legacy and liability that was left over. At first, many of them were in denial as to the problem or the severity of the problem, and then working through systematically to do something about it. And we all know that there's no perfect solution to it, but clearly much can be done, as you can see in White Lake and other places where we can, mitigate these problems and make some major improvements in restoring impaired beneficial uses.
What lessons do communities like the White Lake area often learn from their pollution legacy?
I think, one of the big lessons is that, it is their lake. I think the people that live around there, they're not separate from the ecosystem. They're part of it. It's like the difference between house and home. It's, an ecosystem, you're part of the ecosystem. So people, I think, learned that they're part of the ecosystem, and so these contaminants can affect not only fish and wildlife, but it can affect them over the long haul. I think then with that, if you recognize that, you have, this is your lake, your ecosystem, you work a little harder to be a good steward of it, and so taking some ownership of the cleanup process, that's where people like you, Tanya, were so important, leaders to step up, to bring new people into the process, to build some support for cleanup, and to hang in there until money could come, And so I think this whole concept of local ownership is a really important lesson, and then perseverance, to persevere through the long struggle years, and see now, look at the results, which is so heartening to see what's happened.
What is your knowledge of White Lake's current health and status? Are you familiar with some of the activities?
No, I'm not. Maybe you could go over a few of the things. I know a little bit about Cannery Bay and some of the things, and the outfall of Hooker, but I don't know everything. I know you're working on some habitat and wonderful things too, But
well, we actually have officially removed 4 of the beneficial use impairments or problems in the lake, and so we have 4 more that are likely going to be officially removed this year, and then with a date of possible delisting, removing the entire area of concern designation in 2014.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And are you seeing a response now from sort of in terms of tourism and recreation? Is the perception of the lake different now than before? Again, when I came here, there was sort of a perception of White Lake as, we're just part of, the backyard of chemical industry. And this is sort of the cost of doing business with chemical industry. And is that changing now, the perception? I mean, that you've got this unbelievable, coastal lake off Lake Michigan, and it's an amazing resource. And is that changing?
Well, I do think that there is certainly more of an attitude of stewardship, and I think people, are going to be, much more careful about what happens in the community related to the lake and potential pollution. I think the perception issue is still, I think there's still a perception that the lake is polluted, and I think, that will change over time as people realize the progress that's been made.
Yeah. I think another thing is this whole
what do you think is important or needed to ensure White Lake's environmental health in the future?
I think, the role of citizens. I think a strong citizens organization, like like a PAC or a stakeholder group that tracks, that has continuous and vigorous oversight of what's going on around the lake. So there's the eyes and ears and of what's going on, and if something's popping up, they'll be aware of it, and they'll be able to speak out and deal with it before it becomes a major issue or a major tipping point. I think that's really important. So, and then I think also of this whole broader educational campaign that we're going through, that, the role that all of you play in educating all the stakeholders group about stewardship, Aldo Leopold said you have to learn to love the land to be a true steward of it. It's only when you reconnect to the resource and have that personal relationship and begin to care for it that you can learn to love it, and then you will truly act accordingly and be a good steward of it. So I think we have a long ways to go on that in terms of society, but I think you guys are doing some really yeoman's work in that area in educating everyone, all the stakeholders groups, whether it's in the area of being good stewards and learning to live sustainably.
Is there anything I haven't asked, John, that you would like to address?
No, I don't think so. I think I just, for me, I just looking back and to see the progress that you've made, and I am so incredibly proud of what all of you have done, and you guys are a remarkable example, not just to, people living around White Lake, but you are an example for other places in the Great Lakes. What you do is not just important to White Lake, it's so important for all the Great Lakes, and you literally are giving hope to people elsewhere that you can hang in there, tackle these problems, and make major improvements in them. And so congratulations to you and to all of you there on what you've accomplished, and don't give up the fight for sustainability, because there's always going to be more to be done, right?
Right. Well, thank you, John, for the interview and for your work on the areas of concern and your help to us in White Lake.
Well, thank you so much, and I hope in 2014 I can come up for the celebration.
Well, you are invited.
Thank you so much.